If someone asked me what moment changed everything, I wouldn't mention the day I got promoted to head of strategy, not the time I was praised in front of the board. I would say, it was that night. After the year-end party, when the laughter had died down, the photos were taken, the toasts made, and people started leaving. No one noticed me quietly slipping onto the balcony on the top floor of the company building. The city that night glittered like it was living a different life. Vibrant, glamorous. Pretending not to know people like me. The one standing behind someone else's accomplishments, smiling at the right moments, disappearing from the ones that mattered. I took off my heels and hid them under the chair. My feet ached. My whole body did. Not from the party, but from the role I had played for far too long. I stood still. The wind brushed past my collar like a stranger's hand gently touching my skin. And in that moment, all I wanted was 1 minute, just one. To not be Elena Grant, head of strategy. Not the competent advisor. Not the well-balanced woman. Just a person who could breathe. If you've ever stood in a party, smiling wide while quietly wishing you could disappear. If you've ever been the woman who's always composed, appropriate, reliable, but no one ever asked you, "Are you okay?" Then maybe you've been living the way Elena once did. Follow the channel to never miss the kind of stories that remind you, you are seen. You deserve to be heard. And then he appeared. Gabriel Rhodes, 61 years old, silver at the temples like unfinished dreams, a perfectly tailored suit, and the poise of a man who had built an empire step by step. He had never been the approachable type. In the 12 years I'd worked under him, the distance between us was like the cold tile of a boardroom floor. Professional, polished, and completely uncrossable. But that night he stepped out, not with the gaze of a CEO, but as a man entering a private moment of his own. Running away? His voice came from behind, low and warm. I turned around, not surprised, but unprepared, just needed some air. I smiled as I always did. Gabriel stepped beside me, hands in his pockets. The breeze shifted the edge of his coat. And for the first time I noticed, he no longer carried the posture of control. "The party okay?" "Pretty good," I answered. Though honestly, I've never been one for big crowds. He tilted his head, glanced at me, a look that seemed to read more than I'd said. "You play the part well," he said. "Like you were born for it." Maybe I've just forgotten how not to play it. I chuckled, tired. We stood there, two shadows beneath the city lights. No more words. But in the silence, something shifted. The city still sparkled, but I no longer noticed it. I only noticed him, looking at me, not like a boss looks at an employee, but like a man seeing the part of me that no one had seen in a long, long time. "I don't want to go home just yet," he said. Suddenly, "Care for a drink?" I turned to him, not because of the question, but because I heard something in his voice that didn't sound like him. Not certain, not commanding, just a quiet invitation that somehow reached deep inside me. I should have said no. I was used to saying no. I was Elena Grant, always appropriate, always in control, always holding the line. But I looked at him, and for the first time I saw the man I hadn't let myself feel for 12 years. I nodded gently. "One drink." There are nights that you expect to pass like any other. But then one glance, one invitation, one nod. And you know, life just shifted course. Silently, but irrevocably. We left the company building like two people quietly slipping out of character. Neither of us said a word. Gabriel walked beside me with steady strides. Not fast, not slow, as if he was setting the rhythm for both of us. The city at night no longer shimmered like it did from the balcony view. It appeared more honest now. The streets damp with mist, headlights streaking across puddles like broken reflections, and the distant honking of cars echoing like the weary breath of a collective dream. Gabriel turned into a narrow alley tucked between two old brick buildings. A faint neon glow rippled across a patch of standing rainwater, turning the alley into something out of a noir film. And at the far end was a black wooden door. No sign, just a small glass window glowing a soft amber light. He pushed the door open. The scent of aged wood, worn leather, and old whiskey enveloped me like a memory, even though I'd never been there before. Inside was warmth. Classic. Timeless. As if everything had been perfectly in place since a century ago. A jazz band playing softly in the corner. Deep brown leather chairs swallowing you whole. Low-hanging lights casting pools of golden hush over each table. We chose a quiet corner, where the light only lit part of our faces, leaving the rest to the things we hadn't yet said. Gabriel ordered 2 bourbons. He didn't ask me. Strangely, I didn't feel controlled. I felt understood. When the waiter left, he removed his metal watch and set it gently on the table. A small act, but meaningful. As if he was setting aside time itself, setting aside roles. "I don't usually bring anyone here," he said, voice low, as if he was letting his words land gently in the quiet spaces of the room. But tonight, I didn't want to go back to being who I'm always expected to be. I looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see CEO Gabriel Rhodes. I saw a man with an emptiness in his gaze that no one had ever dared to fill. "I've watched you for years, Elena," he said. "Professional. Always capable. But I've always wondered, beneath it all, who are you really?" I smiled softly, but I didn't deny it. "Maybe I've forgotten to. Or maybe you've just hidden it for too long." The bourbon arrived, amber glinting in the low light. I took a sip, bitter heat spreading across my tongue and warming my chest. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in a space where I didn't have to guard myself. "Have you ever imagined what it would be like if you'd chosen a different path?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the glass slowly circling in his hand. "A life without the schedule, the expectations?" I leaned back, eyes drawn to the reflection of light on the bar counter. "I have. But I got used to doing what's right. The right path, the right pace, the right people. I used to believe that if I stayed right long enough, eventually it would feel right." I turned to him. Gabriel was watching me, not speaking, just looking deeply, quietly, as if he was hearing the things I had never said out loud, even to myself. "You always seemed strong enough not to need anything more." "No one's strong enough not to need to be seen," I replied, softer than I expected. We went quiet. Then, his hand moved toward mine, a gentle brush against the back of my hand, like a silent question. I didn't pull away. No movie soundtrack. No camera flash. Just a single touch. But it was enough to shatter the air around me into quiet fragments. "Elena," he said, eyes still steady on mine. "Maybe we've waited too long for this moment." I wanted to respond, but I didn't know how, because something had just awakened inside me. Not love, not lust, but the feeling of being present, truly deeply, without asking for permission. There are places with no signs, moments with no soundtrack. But if you've been lost long enough, you know when you've stepped into a space where, for the first time, you don't have to pretend to be yourself. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because of an alarm, not because I had a meeting to prep for, but because I simply couldn't sleep anymore. The warmth of a touch left unsaid still lingered in my mind. I made coffee. It wasn't stronger than usual, not weaker either. But the bitterness on my tongue reminded me. Something inside me had changed its hue. I looked at myself in the mirror. Everything appeared the same. White blouse, neatly tied hair, softly lined eyes. But there was something quieter in my reflection, like I was seeing myself from a vantage point I hadn't stood at in years. No longer the woman checking boxes to be perfect, but a soul beginning to listen to herself. For the first time after too many years of living right. I walked into the office. No one looked at me differently. No rumors. No suspicious glances. Only me, the only one who knew the world had tilted ever so slightly in just one night. As I passed the long hallway, the echo of my heels tapping on the marble, I reached the 10th floor, the one with the large glass panel overlooking the executive office. I paused. Gabriel was inside, standing, hands in pockets, staring out. He didn't know I was there. But just as I turned to go, he looked up. Our eyes met. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us nodded. No signal you could name. Just a moment, thin as glass, but heavy like a crack running between two worlds. I meant to walk on, But I stayed. 2 more heartbeats. And in those 2 beats, I knew. He remembered. And I had not forgotten. The day moved on as usual. Emails, meetings, reports. But beneath every rhythm of routine, my thoughts drifted back. To a hand brushing mine. To an unflinching gaze. To a sentence so simple yet more piercing than anything I'd heard in years. If you stay just to be yourself, I'll be here. I sat in meetings but didn't take notes. I answered emails, but accidentally typed his name into the search bar. Late afternoon, I walked out to the office rooftop, a place I often came to regain balance. The city below was still noisy. The buildings still stood tall. But today I wasn't there to escape. I was there to acknowledge. Acknowledge that. I missed that gaze. I missed that unspoken question. I missed that fleeting moment when I was no longer Elena by schedule, but Elena, the woman who once knew desire and had just remembered how that felt. And then, I heard the rooftop door open behind me. I didn't need to turn. I already knew. His voice came gently. Are you avoiding me? I turned, smiled faintly. You're making it sound more serious than it is. He stepped closer. Not in a rush. Not pressing. Hands in pockets. Eyes searching. Still the Gabriel Rhodes everyone knew. But today, I saw something else in those eyes. Gabriel the man. Not the boss. Last night was different, he said. Simple. Direct. I nodded. And I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. Neither am I, he replied. But you saw it too. Even though we spent the whole day playing our old roles, things aren't the same anymore. I looked at him, didn't deny it. And in the soft dusk falling across his face, I saw one thing clearly. We hadn't crossed any boundaries, but our feelings already had. There are days when everything looks the same, but you are not. A look, a pause, a step taken slower than usual. And you know, something inside you has whispered, a truth you can't go back from. We stood beside each other, not close, not far, just a breath apart, one decision away, one act of permission. The wind on the rooftop slipped over my shoulders, one wrist bare, one chest hollow. Gabriel looked at me, his eyes no longer sharp like in meetings, no longer sure like in his directives, but the gaze of a man waiting, for the first time, for an answer not from reason, but from someone's heart. We shouldn't continue this, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. You're the boss. I'm your subordinate. Some things are best left untouched. Gabriel didn't respond right away. He looked at me for a long time. Then finally he spoke, his voice low, slow, like the opening note of a song that takes its time. I know what you're thinking, and I've thought the same for years. I gave a faint laugh. And now I'm not so sure anymore. I turned away, not to avoid him, but because I wasn't sure I was strong enough to meet his eyes just then. Inside me a tide had stirred. Not loud but rising steadily, silently. Gabriel stepped forward a little. Not rushing. Not pushing. Just closing the space enough for his voice to reach my ear like a whisper. Not demanding, but enough to set my heart off rhythm. Elena, if you say just one thing, you're wrong. I'll turn around. I'll pretend last night never happened. I'll go back to being the boss who talks only numbers and strategies. He paused. My eyes welled up, but I didn't blink. But if you stay silent, just silent, I'll know. I'll know you felt it too. I said nothing. Because I couldn't. Because I did feel it, clearer than anything. I felt my body no longer holding tension. I felt the soft tremble in my palms. Felt I'd stopped playing the role of the woman who never needed anything more. Gabriel raised his hand so slowly, as if afraid to shatter the fragile air between us. His fingers touched my wrist, the place no one had held just to listen. Just one touch, but I felt my whole body breathe because of it. I looked up at him. Gabriel, I don't know where this will go. Neither do I, he replied, his voice soft like the last warmth of a glass of bourbon. But not everything needs a pre-planned route. Some things just need to be felt. The wind picked up. I shivered. Gabriel immediately took off his coat, gently placing it over my shoulders. I didn't refuse. It still carried the scent of cedarwood and leather, the scent of last night, the scent of an unnamed pause. And when he looked at me, this time not asking for permission, but not avoiding either, I saw it in his eyes, an invitation, not to come to him, but to return to myself, the woman I'd buried under layers of responsibility. Come away with me, Gabriel said softly, gaze steady. Just for the evening. No roles.
No titles.
No office. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because for the first time in a long time, I wanted to do something just for myself. And that scared me. I glanced through the glass door and saw the office lights still on, fingers still typing, meetings still running, the machine still spinning. But if I stepped back inside, I knew exactly what would happen. I'd smile politely, say goodbye to each person, go home, switch on the kitchen light, reheat dinner, and live through yet another night that pretended last night didn't exist. I turned back to Gabriel. All right, I whispered, just for one night. And we walked away. Some boundaries aren't drawn in red ink. They're defined by glances, a touch of the hand, and the courage to be real. And when we dare to step off the script, not for love, but for the simple need to feel alive just once, all those old lines become meaningless. How many times have you pulled back just because it wasn't supposed to happen? How many times have you stayed quiet because your heart wasn't part of life's to-do list? But then one light touch so small is enough to remind you you've been living too long playing the role of the strong one but lonely. If you know that feeling, follow this channel, because here we won't tell you that you have to fall in love. We'll just remind you, you deserve to feel. Asterisk asterisk. We stood beside each other, not close, not far, just a breath apart, one decision away, one act of permission. The wind on the rooftop slipped over my shoulders, one wrist bare, one chest hollow. Gabriel looked at me, his eyes no longer sharp like in meetings, no longer sure like in his directives, but the gaze of a man waiting, for the first time, for an answer not from reason, but from someone's heart. We shouldn't continue this, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. You're the boss. I'm your subordinate. Some things are best left untouched. Gabriel didn't respond right away. He looked at me for a long time. Then finally he spoke, his voice low, slow, like the opening note of a song that takes its time. I know what you're thinking, and I've thought the same for years. I gave a faint laugh. And now I'm not so sure anymore. I turned away, not to avoid him, but because I wasn't sure I was strong enough to meet his eyes just then. Inside me a tide had stirred, not loud but rising steadily, silently. Gabriel stepped forward a little, not rushing, not pushing, just closing the space enough for his voice to reach my ear like a whisper. Not demanding, but enough to set my heart off rhythm. Elena, if you say just one thing, you're wrong. I'll turn around. I'll pretend last night never happened. I'll go back to being the boss who talks only numbers and strategies. He paused. My eyes welled up, but I didn't blink. But if you stay silent, just silent, I'll know. I'll know you felt it too. I said nothing, because I couldn't, because I did feel it clearer than anything. I felt my body no longer holding tension. I felt the soft tremble in my palms. Felt I'd stopped playing the role of the woman who never needed anything more. Gabriel raised his hand so slowly, as if afraid to shatter the fragile air between us. His fingers touched my wrist, the place no one had held, just to listen. Just one touch. But I felt my whole body breathe because of it. I looked up at him. Gabriel, I don't know where this will go. Neither do I, he replied, his voice soft like the last warmth of a glass of bourbon. But not everything needs a pre-planned route. Some things just need to be felt. The wind picked up. I shivered. Gabriel immediately took off his coat, gently placing it over my shoulders. I didn't refuse. It still carried the scent of cedarwood and leather, the scent of last night, the scent of an unnamed pause. And when he looked at me, this time not asking for permission, but not avoiding either, I saw it in his eyes. An invitation, not to come to him, but to return to myself, the woman I'd buried under layers of responsibility. Come away with me, Gabriel said softly, gaze steady. Just for the evening. No roles.
No titles.
No office. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because for the first time in a long time, I wanted to do something just for myself, and that scared me. I glanced through the glass door and saw the office lights still on, fingers still typing, meetings still running, the machine still spinning. But if I stepped back inside, I knew exactly what would happen. I'd smile politely, say goodbye to each person, go home, switch on the kitchen light, reheat dinner, and live through yet another night that pretended last night didn't exist. I turned back to Gabriel. All right, I whispered, just for one night. And we walked away. Some boundaries aren't drawn in red ink. They're defined by glances, a touch of the hand, and the courage to be real. And when we dare to step off the script, not for love, but for the simple need to feel alive just once, all those old lines become meaningless. How many times have you pulled back? Just because it wasn't supposed to happen? How many times have you stayed quiet? Because your heart wasn't part of life's to-do list. But then one light touch so small is enough to remind you. You've been living too long playing the role of the strong one, but lonely. If you know that feeling, follow this channel. Because here, we won't tell you that you have to fall in love. We'll just remind you, you deserve to feel. Asterisk asterisk. We walked. No one asked, where are we going? No one needed to define what was happening. Because for the first time I felt the truth was being allowed to lead. Gabriel turned down a quiet street along the edge of the city. Shops were closed, streetlights flickering shadows into corners. At the far end, a small restaurant still glowed warm golden light. A hand-carved wooden sign, glass windows misted with breath and evening chill. There were no crowds.
No noise.
He opened the door. The scent of buttered mushrooms, fresh bread, and old red wine welcomed me like a gentle embrace. For a kind of tiredness I didn't even know I'd been carrying. We chose a table by the window, not the hidden corner. 'Cause tonight, I didn't need to hide. Gabriel didn't ask the waiter anything. Just a glance. A nod. The waiter disappeared. Perhaps he came here often. But tonight, I knew. He came here with someone he had never allowed himself to feel with before. He took off his coat. I placed it on the chair beside me, where my back had just leaned. The wine arrived. I raised my glass. We clinked softly. No toast, no scripted words. Just a gentle sound. Like the quiet breath of two souls stepping past a silent threshold. Gabriel leaned back, his eyes following the swirl of dark wine in his glass. And then he spoke, slowly, like each word was choosing itself. I'm not sure what's happening, but for the first time in a long time, I don't want to analyze it. I laughed. Lightly. Honestly, we've been trained to kill every feeling with logic. Rational. Reasonable. Safe. He paused. But you know something? Sometimes, safe is just another word for loneliness we've learned to accept. I looked at him, and I understood. More deeply than any words ever spoken. We talked. A lot. I told him about the sleepless nights spent finishing reports before quarterly reviews, only to not hear a single thank you. I told him how I'd been praised for being steady, composed, but no one had ever asked if I wanted to break. I told him how I pretended to be content with a life so hollow I couldn't even hear my own voice inside it. Gabriel listened. No interjections. No nods pretending to understand. He just listened, with the full presence of a man who had once lost himself in almost the exact same way. Then it was his turn. He told me about the early days, sleepless from pressure, yet always putting on strength. About relationships that failed because work always won. About the feeling of building an empire. And then sitting in a luxury apartment at night with no one to tell how the day had gone. I chose success, Elena, he said, his eyes somewhere far beyond the table. But some nights I wonder if there's even a real person left inside that life. When he finished, I didn't speak. I just placed my hand on the table, palm up, open like a quiet harbor. He looked at me, didn't ask, just silently placed his hand over mine. And in the amber light, the soft pour of wine, the faint jazz in the background, we, two people who had sat at opposite ends of boardroom tables, for the first time, sat on the same side of ourselves. No promises were made. No one named it love. We just knew tonight, we didn't need to play anyone's role. Some nights, all you need is a quiet place, a wooden table, and someone who listens. And it's enough to bring you back to the part of yourself that's been lost for far too long. And when there's no performance left, you don't need to define what this is. You just need to know, this is real. By the time we stepped out of the restaurant, the city had quieted. Street lamps glowed dimly, like eyes still swollen from an emotional storm. The night breeze wasn't cold anymore. It felt like someone had just exhaled after making a big decision. We walked slowly. No one rushed. No one asked, "What now?" Because both of us knew, this silence said more than any words could. Gabriel walked beside me, hands in his coat pockets. Our shoulders brushed now and then as we moved in sync. I felt warmth from him, not from his body, but from a kind of peace only those who have lived through long silences can carry. We stopped at a small intersection where an old street lamp cast golden light onto the cobblestone sidewalk. The glow was soft, coating my hair with a quiet shimmer like honey. I turned. Gabriel was looking at me, unhidden, unhesitant. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, voice low and steady like breath in the cold air. "But I also don't want to pretend this was just a night." I didn't answer right away, not out of confusion, but because I understood exactly what he meant. And I didn't want to pretend either. A soft breeze brushed past. I pulled my collar slightly closer. Gabriel noticed, but instead of offering his coat like before, he raised his hand, not to shield me, but to gently touch my cheek with the back of his cool hand, just enough for me to close my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, he was still looking at me, as if no one had ever looked at me quite like that before. Not urgently, not expectantly, not stepping closer unless I allowed it. And it was that patience, that respect, that made me lower every guard I didn't realize I was still holding. I stepped forward. He didn't move. Only his eyes softened, like a door slowly, quietly opening. I don't remember who tilted their head first, or whose hand touched whose face. I just know our lips met, gently, slowly, tentatively. And truly, it wasn't the kind of kiss that burns. It didn't come with fireworks or music swelling in the background. It felt like a light blanket over a heart that had been cold for far too long. It felt like someone saying, "I see you now," without saying anything at all. Gabriel placed his hand at the back of my neck, not to pull me in but just to hold. And me? I stopped thinking. I let myself feel. We parted slowly. His forehead rested against mine. Our breath mingled, like morning fog folding around all the things that couldn't be explained. "This," I whispered, "has changed everything, hasn't it?" Gabriel nodded softly. "But maybe," he said, "not in the wrong way." I leaned gently into his chest, not deeply, not for long, just enough to hear the heartbeat behind the suit I used to believe only measured results and logic. And I thought, maybe what we remember most won't be the busy days, but a moment, a small one, when we dared to pause and touch someone with the part of ourselves we had long forgotten. Some kisses don't make your heart explode, they bring it back home. Some touches don't burn, but warm you more than any fire ever could. And some moments, even just a few seconds under a golden light, you know, you can't take it back. And you don't want to. I woke up early, not because of an alarm, not because of a dream that pulled me out of sleep. I woke up because, for the first time in a long while, I felt alive. Morning light streamed through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. The air in the room was still, like a quiet chapel. I didn't reach for my phone, didn't check my email, didn't think about work. I just lay there, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat, a sound I had forgotten could whisper. I placed a hand over my chest. Everything around me was the same. The room, the bed, the water glass on the nightstand. But I was not the same. Something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I knew I couldn't go back to who I was even if I tried. Memories of last night returned, slow and tender like a film in soft focus. The kiss under the amber streetlight. His hand brushing my cheek. The murmur, I don't want to pretend anymore. And my own inner voice, never spoken aloud, but suddenly so clear in the reflection of my eyes. I don't want to live halfway anymore. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. Looked at myself in the mirror. Still Elena, hair tied, eyes alert. But behind the light mascara, behind the professional smile, was a woman relearning how to see herself as a person, not a performance. My phone buzzed. Gabriel. Gabriel. Good morning. No regrets, I hope? I smiled, a smile that didn't feel forced. Elena. None. You. The reply came quickly. Gabriel. Not a single one. Can I see you tonight? I stared at those words for a long time. Not because I was unsure, but because, for the first time in my life, I was asking myself, what would it look like to choose real instead of safe? Finally, I typed slowly. Elena. Yes. But we need to talk first. That day, I went to work as usual. Same white blouse. Same gray blazer. I walked past the hallway on the 10th floor. Same keyboard clicks. Same printers. Same elevator sounds. The world hadn't changed. But I no longer walked through it invisible. I passed his office. The glass door was closed. He was on the phone, back turned. I kept walking. But right at that moment he turned. Our eyes met. Just for a second.
No smile. No nod.
But that glance said more than any message ever could. I see you. I'm still here. That evening, I left work early. Not because I had to. Not because someone told me to. But because something in me needed a space with no deadlines, no roles. I went to the park. Sat on our usual bench beneath the ginkgo trees, golden leaves drifting around me. Gabriel was already there. Sunset light brushed across his shoulder, casting the kind of stillness only those who've weathered long storms carry. I sat beside him. Didn't speak at first. After a while, I turned. Gabriel, I need to know. Where is this going? He didn't answer right away. He looked straight at me, honest. I don't have a map, he said. But I know one thing. I don't want last night to be something I try to forget. I nodded softly. I don't either. We didn't name what this was. Didn't call it love. Didn't call it wrong. Didn't call it anything at all. We just chose to stay. Reality knocks in many ways. With light. With silence. Or with a question that doesn't need an answer. If today you had the choice to live as your truest self, would you? And if you can answer that, then you've truly lived. Not because the world told you to be strong, but because you finally stopped rejecting your own heart. 1 week later, I walked into the office with familiar footsteps. The elevator still dinged at the 10th floor. The coffee machine still dripped. The whiteboard still listed the week's meetings. Everything was the same. Except me. Gabriel was speaking with the CFO in the hallway. I passed by. No lowering my gaze. No avoidance. His eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. No smile. No gesture. But in that look, I saw the one thing that gave me peace, clarity. Not the kind of clarity that says this is what we are. But the kind that says, we know we're walking into something. Unnamed, undefined, but real. At noon, I received a text. Gabriel. No dinner, no wine. Just a corner cafe and 2 people in no hurry. Would you say yes? I typed, only if you don't bring your laptop. He replied with a little emoji. Hands raised in surrender. That evening we sat at the familiar little cafe.
No candles.
No special menu. Just 2 cups of Americano, a few scattered stories, and occasional silences that didn't need filling. What do you think about all this? I asked, eyes watching the raindrops trail down the window. Gabriel smiled gently. I think, this is the first time in my entire career I don't need to know how the story ends. I just need to know it didn't begin with pretending. I stayed quiet. Because I understood. Because I felt the same. There are things in the culture we live in, a culture of progress, of labels, of define the relationship, that demand a name, a confirmation, a box to fit everything into. But sometimes, the bravest thing is not naming the relationship. It's daring to live honestly inside of it. I used to think love was only for those with nothing left to lose, I said softly. But maybe the more we've lived, the more we've lost. The more we owe it to ourselves to love truthfully, not by script. Gabriel looked at me.
No interruption.
He just placed his hand on the table, close to mine. Not touching. An unspoken invitation. I didn't place my hand over his, but I didn't pull away either. Because sometimes choosing to stay is already its own kind of yes. We left the cafe just as the rain stopped. Gabriel walked me to my car, streetlights casting a soft glow on his hair, highlighting features once defined by the word successful, but now simply real enough not to need more. Elena, he said, if tomorrow you want to stop this, I'll respect that. But if you want to keep going, we'll walk slowly with no pressure to define anything. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him, a man who had once been the blueprint for logic, now brave enough to admit, feelings have no KPIs, no roadmap, and don't need to be measured by reason. I don't know where this will go, I said, but I know. I don't want to live like I did before. He smiled, a small smile but honest. We parted that night not with a kiss, just a gentle touch of hands, and a look that followed me as I drove away. And I thought, maybe what keeps us moving forward isn't a 5-year plan, but someone willing to walk with us, even if neither of us knows exactly where the road will lead. In a culture where everything demands a label, a definition, a plan, choosing to live honestly, slowly, without names, without a script, is the hardest thing of all. But if you're brave enough to stay, to stop pretending, to say, I don't know what I am in this, but I know I want to be real, then that is exactly where everything begins, but not the old way. Speech balloon. Maybe you've been waiting for something certain before you begin. A title, a plan, someone to confirm your worth. But the truth is, happiness sometimes begins with a glance that doesn't look away, a hand that doesn't rush, and 2 people brave enough not to pretend. If you've ever asked, can I live truthfully, even if I'm not sure of the way? Then welcome. Follow this channel, because here, we begin again. Not the old way, but the real way. They say, the deepest pain isn't being forgotten, it's being present, yet unseen. I can't remember the last time someone called me Clara. Not honey, not her, not my wife, but Clara. A name that once made someone smile, once rang out in sunlit afternoons. Now, it only exists on utility bills, prescription refills, and in my own memory. Have you ever felt like you're living with people, but no one really sees you? If you've ever stepped out of your bedroom, made breakfast, cleaned every corner, listened to everyone's stories, and no one asked, are you okay? Then maybe you're living like Clara.
I'm Clara. I'm 62.
I'm not dead, but I'm not truly alive either, not in the way that counts. Each morning, I wake up before my alarm, not because something exciting awaits, but simply because sleep has long abandoned me. The early light creeps through the lace curtains, illuminating the dust in the air like memories not yet fully formed. I stand in the kitchen, pouring warm water into a chipped green teapot, a wedding gift from Jonathan's mother. The faint scent of mint drifts into the room, as if trying to fill the quiet space between 2 people who once loved each other deeply, but now only share a roof, not a gaze. Jonathan hasn't changed. He moves with the precision of the Swiss watch he wears. 7 a.m. downstairs. 7:15 boiled eggs and toast. 7:30. Out the door with a quick, I'm off. No kiss on the cheek. No lingering look. No, how are you? I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just fading. Like the framed picture hanging in our dining room. Once carefully chosen, once admired by guests. Now no one even looks up. It's still there, but no one sees it anymore. That afternoon, I stood in the backyard, the garden I've nurtured for nearly 2 decades. The lavender swayed in the crisp autumn breeze. I stared at them for a long time, then suddenly wondered, if I disappeared tomorrow, would they wither? Not because I matter, but because would anyone water them? My phone buzzed. A text from Jonathan. Company gala this Friday. Come with me. Dress code. Formal. No question mark.
No worms.
I read the message, and somehow it felt colder than the October air outside.